Well, good morning, everyone. It is great to be here and to see you all. And the words of Dr. King are really resonating with me this morning. Will America, will we take the high road or will we take the low road? Somehow, and I've watched that video so many times and know that speech, and yet it just pierced in a different way, as he is prone to do. So good morning, everybody. I am so glad to be able to be here with you all. It is our morning breakfast time. It is our coffee time. It is my just delight that I have the opportunity to meet so many amazing people in Cleveland because of my job and because of this Go Live for Equity. I get to share that with you, and so that's been delightful. Today we have Justin Bibb with us, and I'm so excited that you all are going to hear from Justin and meet him and demand that you hear more of him. He is exciting. He's doing amazing things in America, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you, Margaret, for having me.
So Justin is a Clevelander. He did his undergrad at American University, which I have an American story. I'll tell that later. Okay. And then you went to Case for your JD and MBA?
That's correct. Yes, okay. I'm a glutton for punishment.
Clearly.
Yeah.
You've done what I call deep carpet work in the corporate space. You've had an important VP role at Key Bank. You've had senior leadership roles with Gallup, and now you are Chief Strategy Officer with Urbanova?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
I love that title, Chief Strategy Officer. That is like yes, yes, and yes. And so Urbanova, very involved in middle market communities across the country and best practices, and really pushing forward on equity. And we're gonna get into all of that. I wanna hear your thoughts from Nashville to Tulsa to Spokane to Cleveland, Akron, just so many exciting things. But you also started a nonprofit.
Yeah, that's correct. Cleveland Can't Wait.
And all summer long, I've been thinking about Cleveland Can't Wait, and I have not been able to wait to ask you if the title of your nonprofit, if you named it after Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait.
Yeah, I did, and seeing that video this morning really just hit me in a very deep way because Dr. King's words and the images in that video are really relevant today. You could insert 2020, you would see the same thing. And so that was the impetus for us creating this nonprofit, because we just had a sense of urgency about the problems we were seeing in our city, and we wanted to find new ways and new solutions to solve those problems.
It's really it's an amazing book. It is one of my favorite. I have it right here, Why We Can't Wait. And in this book, Dr. King's, he wrote it in 1963. Mm-hmm. He talks about reparations in that book. And I want to just get your thoughts on the work that's happening in Asheville. Was it Asheville, North Carolina?
Yeah, I believe so.
Has looked into, as a community, reparations, I believe through housing and other credits.
Yeah, and I recently just saw that Governor Gavin Newsom has launched a commission or a study to determine for the state of California the best way to address the issue of reparations. So you're seeing this national movement now about how to really ensure we're using all the tools of public policy to address the structural inequities we've seen since 400 years that Black folks were brought to this country in 1619.
I love in the book, Dr. King uses an example. He uses the GI Bill
Hmm.
which we know that the GI Bill for Blacks, for African Americans and Latinos and others could be sort of pulled back at state and local levels. So we didn't really enjoy the fullness of the GI Bill. But the GI Bill, Dr. King asserts, was really an opportunity to say to a certain group of people, hey, you missed out on some things because you were at war. And so we're going to open up a different level of the playing field so that you can enter and be able to access education and housing and other benefits that the rest of America would not have access to. And it was, it's still a solid argument.
Indeed, indeed.
So just one more thought before we leave the nonprofit. Tell us about it, what you're up to, what you're working on.
So, our goal is to really identify how to use civic technology and entrepreneurship as a vehicle to create more opportunity in some of our most disadvantaged neighborhoods across the city of Cleveland. And, our first effort was creating a young business builders program for students across the city. And the reason being, I read a report from the Center for Community Solutions in 2018, and it said that roughly, when you look at the unemployment rate amongst our youth, it's costing us roughly $1 billion of lost economic productivity. And so we have so many, young baby Einsteins crawling our streets across the city, but they don't have the access to the right mentorship and development to learn how to grow and start their business. And so we worked with over 12 students across Cleveland to give them the venture development skills they needed. Last year, we were getting ready to start a new program, and then COVID hit. So we pivoted our business model. We worked with Masks for Community and the great work they've done to help distribute over 70,000 masks for residents in East Cleveland and Cleveland. And also tomorrow, we're kicking off our Digital Land Initiative in my hometown neighborhood of Mount Pleasant and Union Miles to really help local businesses in those communities get connected to the digital economy, because if they're not connected online in this COVID era, they're going to miss out on a lot of opportunity to grow and scale their ventures. So we're really trying to meet the needs of those businesses right now at the local level.
We were a little sleepy on the digital divide, weren't we? I mean, not just in Cleveland, but you really work in a space across the country. Talk about what you're seeing there.
Well, since the early, 2010, 2012, we started to see a lot of cities think about how to leverage smart cities technology to really upskill their residents for the digital economy. In San Jose, they launched a digital equity fund several years ago before COVID to ensure that residents had access to broadband and that businesses had the tools they needed to compete in the digital economy. And, in 2014, a group of us started Hack Cleveland after the tragic murder of Tamir Rice, because we wanted to figure out, was civic technology a tool for us to really reimagine how we think about criminal justice reform? And we were banging down folks' doors in 2014 talking about the digital divide and digital equity, and no one really paid us a lot of attention. And now we're seeing this issue being so important for our young students and families across our city. A recent study from the census just told us that we are the most unconnected city in America right now. And so going back to why we started We Cant Wait was, we have to become more proactive and have a sense of urgency about these problems before they become even more impactful and a major problem for our residents, and that we can't afford to wait for these type of solutions to move the needle forward.
In 2014, it was hard to even see how those dots got connected, and yet they are front and center for us today, and just so incredibly important. When I think about what is happening with mid-sized markets, you mentioned San Jose, I mentioned Asheville, and this is really the sweet spot for Urbanova, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We think that mid-sized cities are well positioned to lead America's recovery for a post-COVID world, given their ability to experiment on bold policy ideas, in a very fast, efficient, and effective way. Secondly, the cost of living in many of these markets is really helpful to grow and start a business and raise a family. And also, I think that for far too long, investment has been siloed on the coast, whether it's in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston. And now we're seeing the importance of really investing in Midwestern cities and mid-sized cities across the country. And a city like Cleveland, given all of our great assets, and although we have a lot of challenges, I think a city like Cleveland could lead America's recovery if we have the right imagination and the bold leadership to do so.
When you think about cities getting into some deep policy work and really starting to land and circle around some courageous and brave change, particularly in the space of dismantling racism, who comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, right now, one of a leader I look up to a lot is Mayor Michael Tubbs out of Stockton, California. He was the first mayor in America to launch a universal basic income pilot, which was a core tenet of Dr. King's campaign in the 1960s. And now, because of the successful effort of that pilot, over 15 plus mayors across the country, from Pittsburgh to St. Paul, are now looking at how do they deploy universal basic income programs in their respective cities to ensure that the working poor have the access and the tools and the financial resources they need to recover during this challenging time. And it's that type of bold policy vision that I think our communities need now more than ever as we think about how to move forward.
It is, I was reading a New York Times article, and I wasn't sure if it was from last week or earlier this summer. But yeah, Stockton doing some amazing things. Just and I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley in Fresno, so I know Stockton well. Young mayor there, and really stepped in, really started pursuing this several years ago. Knew this was a key difference maker for his community. And it's about $600 in additional income that a family receives. I believe there's a pilot, maybe 1,000 families that are involved. And it's amazing looking and tracking and understanding just how important this has been to families, the brilliant way the families have used this additional income. It is just, it's a wow. And so, who else comes to mind for you? I agree with you. I am cheering Stockton on, and I think they're a great model for all of us.
Yeah, I would also look at the work that Randall Woodfin's doing in Birmingham to turn that city around. Mayor Steve Reed in Montgomery, Alabama, and also we have a lot of great community foundations and nonprofits across the country that are really reimagining how they think about their business models to really think differently about philanthropy and the nonprofit service delivery model to ensure that we are truly meeting the needs of residents. My former employer, Gallup, just launched a 100-year effort through their Center for Black Voices to really understand and measure the Black experience in America. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see in our work is many stakeholders don't understand and don't have the right data to really understand what's the true lived experiences of the residents we're trying to serve. And without that data, you make a lot of policy decisions on the wrong assumptions. So we need to really think differently about how are we managing and measuring the problems that we're trying to solve, and how can we be more intentional in doing that to make sure that the policy solutions are truly impacting the communities who need them the most.
Did you say 100-year?
100-year effort to truly measure the Black experience in America. And Gallup's been doing this work since the early 1940s. So we're going to have a nice treasure trove of data to look at over time.
It's exciting. It's good to hear. Reinforces, I think, where we need to be going.
Absolutely.
You're familiar that we are very invested here at the YWCA in terms of racism as a public health crisis. You also must be aware that Ohio has the largest number of municipalities that have pushed in on this issue.
Yeah.
And we are really excited to see our sister YWCAs across the state of Ohio really playing an important leadership role. But I want to get your thoughts on the danger of a declaration and the power of a declaration and where it can go. How do we codify this thing? How
Yeah.
do we really get into the next layer?
You know, one of my favorite quotes comes from the former CEO of American Express, Kenshin Nault, and he says that the role of a leader is to define reality and give hope. And I think by having this declaration that racism is a public health crisis, is really showing to folks that, hey, we understand that racism is real and it affects folks across our city and our region on an everyday basis. But now we have to think differently about what does that truly mean from a public policy and investment perspective. Until we think boldly and take more risk in terms of public policy in this community, then I think we won't see any real systemic change on these issues. And there are a number of things we can do starting tomorrow to address the racism as a public health issue completely. You know, the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, just launched a universal basic income program for Black mothers to help them during the issues around infant mortality rate. And that's an immediate, direct policy solution that's addressing a structural racism issue. And I also think about the importance of economic opportunity and jobs. You know, how do we have a bold Marshall Plan in our community to bring back neighborhoods that I grew up in Mount Pleasant, Union Miles, and Lee Harvard? Because until we bring back the east side of our city, I don't think Cleveland can truly live up to its full potential as a place of opportunity for all. And so we have to start thinking about moving from declarations and great press releases to bold, strong policy action solutions to really address these structural issues in a more intentional way.
Wow, I missed that coming out of San Francisco. I've got to go back and check on that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
As you were talking, what was rolling through my mind was, I think we're a little risk averse in Cleveland.
Yeah. Yeah, we you know, I've said on many panels and in many speeches that we have a terrible relationship with risk in our community. Failure is seen as just a pariah. If you fail, you kind of get thrown out of town, unfortunately, and everyone wants to kind of keep the image of we're doing good, we're moving the ball forward. And until we change our relationship with risk, I don't think we'll ever be able to truly achieve our full potential as a city. So we got to be more risk oriented. And I'm not saying be careless in that risk, but we have to think differently and bolder about the things we're trying to accomplish. And until we do that, we won't see any real change.
You know, that risk aversion is fascinating to me because I think to myself, what is the harm in test tubing something?
Yeah.
It really, as you have talked about California and the pieces that are happening, these are really, test tube initiatives to see about how they go to scale. And so you're not trying to lead somebody, this risk, it seems like it's a pretty low risky endeavor built on data, built on, on good, smart, solid policy.
Yeah. And surely, we tend to, we're really good at finding money for big shiny objects, medical mart, new stadiums, and those infrastructure investments are important. Don't get me wrong, but brick and mortar real estate projects are not a panacea to solving our economic problems. And if we can find millions of dollars for these nice shiny objects, surely we can find millions of dollars to fund a UBI pilot, or to fund year-round internship programs for our youth across our city, or to ensure that our our businesses in Mount Pleasant and in Clark Fulton have the access to capital they need to grow and scale their business. And so we got to just think differently about our priorities moving forward.
It's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge, because when you start withering the outer edges of the vine, the
Mhm.
whole vineyard is not going to be healthy. No matter what you do, trying to make sure that the core is
Yeah.
strong, when those outer edges of the vineyard are not, of the vine are not strong, you're
Mhm.
hurting the entire vineyard.
Absolutely.
So you spend a lot of time thinking about the future.
Yeah.
I would consider you a futurist. I'm fascinated by futurists, um, and I'm and I know that futurist conversations are built in solid, in a realm of reality. I
Mhm.
can remember a futurist maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and she was talking about 3D printers and
Mm.
how we would come to rely on them, and they would be sort of a standard, sort of piece. And, to just look at the role 3D printers has played in during the pandemic has just been amazing, and how it's not a futuristic thing anymore.
No.
And
Yeah.
so what's up? What's happening? What are you thinking about? How should talk about your sort of role and framing as a futurist? What
Yeah.
is exciting you? What do you think is going to be pushed in for cities, particularly?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
what are you thinking about?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I think the fear about technology in terms of how cities adopt it is becoming more acceptable. I'll give you an example. Through my work at RTA, we started an ad hoc technology and innovation committee to really look at, how could we bring RTA into the 21st century? And so now we have Wi-Fi on all of our buses and trains across the region. Right before the pandemic, we were one of the first public agencies in the community to live stream our board meetings so that our riders and core stakeholders could tune in to see what was going on with the agency at the start of COVID-19. In other communities, I'm also seeing this shift to true remote work. Tulsa and Topeka have just launched programs where they're incentivizing folks from the coast to come to their communities and live there, embracing the future of work, knowing that now you can work from anywhere in the country or in the world and live in a Cleveland or a Tulsa or Detroit, et cetera. And then thirdly, when I think about the digital divide and how do we think about scaling broadband, I look at all of the streetlights across our city, and I'm looking downtown from my apartment now, and imagine if we put a smart node in every streetlight in our city and created a connective network to have more public access to broadband in a very intentional way. That would allow us to have a solution at scale to address the digital divide. So really thinking about the core assets and infrastructure that we own and reimagining those assets to really meet the needs of our residents. Because all of these things are interconnected. And many times we look at these investments as just true expenses versus long-term investments for the future. And so those are the things that keep me up at night as I think about the future and as I think about my work, helping city leaders across the country really try to meet the moment we're in right
What is a smart node?
now. So essentially a smart node is a piece of technology that allows you to send signals back and forth. So you can put Wi-Fi technology in this node that would allow them to talk to each other. So in Spokane, what we're doing, we're using smart nodes and we have air quality sensors inside of streetlights, particularly in underserved neighborhoods, to really measure the air quality of those neighborhoods when we have many wildfire events that impact the air quality of those respective communities. So we have predictive data and predictive analytics helping the mayor's office and helping our other community stakeholders in Spokane really address the needs of residents in a more intentional way. And that's how you can use technology and data to truly meet the needs of everyday people.
I love that. I mean, that is amazing. We've touched a little bit during these conversations around environmentalism and
Yeah.
racism. And certainly, I think lead comes to mind for most folks. But air quality is huge. We know that the tree canopy within neighborhoods with high density populations of African Americans, the tree canopy is lower. And of course, that has an impact on air quality. So much is wrapped up in that air quality. But sometimes when we think about health, we sort of have this fallback. Number one, we think it's your fault,
Yeah.
Black America, your health is poor. And now as we begin to step back and understand elements of racism, we are beginning to understand the impact of toxic stress and how it plays on our health. And, I think air quality and quality of life and recreation and environmentalism, all these pieces play into health in a way that we don't think often is substantive.
Yeah. And a lot of cities that I'm working with, Spokane being one example, the mayor there said, look, we have to go from just great infrastructure to green infrastructure. So when you're, laying down new cement on a sidewalk, are there some, green energy renewable practices that we could deploy to make more resilient to whatever stressors that impact that street? And we also can't negate the intersection of the importance of health and the built environment. The ability to have a safe park to play and fellowship in can go a long way in making a neighborhood more thriving and more prosperous long term. So those things have to be a priority moving forward.
Here's a great question from a friend, and she is asking, what is the balance between government and the private sector? Which is a great question. Urbanova is a public-private venture. And so what is the balance in being able to take risk and make true policy change?
It's a hard, tricky balance that no one has quite solved, to be honest. A couple of good examples to think about. First being the failure of Google and their sidewalk collapse venture in Toronto. They planned this $1 billion initiative to create the smartest city in America in Toronto. And because they didn't do the hard work of engaging residents about the importance of data and privacy and what truly being a smart city means, Google had to pull out of that venture. We saw in San Diego, they partnered with GE Lighting to redo all of their streetlights, and the residents didn't realize that they were being those streetlights were surveilling those communities without their permission. And so now San Diego is going back to the drawing board to say, well, if we want to have the most connected, smartest streetlights in America, we got to start with the people. We got to start having conversations with residents at the ground level before we start designing this technology. And in this sector, I see a lot. You have government priorities over here and the commercial priorities over there, and there's little alignment. And I think it's important for us to think about how we talk to each other, how we make priorities to ensure we can kind of increase that alignment moving forward. But it's a huge problem in this field that allows my organization to stay in business, which is pretty exciting.
It really is. I have just a tiny little glimpse of this, but it's such a chicken and an egg. No one, it's almost as if no one wants to be the first to blink. The governmental, the municipalities say, we can't shoulder this whole thing. And the private sector is saying, we can't shoulder this whole thing. And so no one really wants to blink first. And yet together, we do see, you mentioned, stadiums as an example. We've seen across the country incredible public-private ventures that come together to create football stadiums.
Yeah.
And yet, when there's an inkling around blame, maybe,
Mm,
or responsibility,
mm,
or keeping for oppression, it feels more difficult.
mhm. Yeah, I think it really boils down to this uncomfort. We all love our comfort zones, and it's hard for us to get out of our comfort zones. I think we're making strides, though. I was talking to a group of friends of mine the other day, and we were reflecting on the progress we made since the tragic murder of George Floyd. And I will tell you, as someone who marched in the city during that day with my mom and a few other friends, it was the first time in my adult life where I saw my white brothers and sisters, screaming Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace. I was moved to tears. And the juxtaposition of that emotion with the emotion the following morning actually got stuck. I couldn't get home that night due to everything going on. I walked from a buddy's place from Detroit Shoreway, and I came home and I saw the devastation to my neighborhood. I've lived downtown for the last 6 years, and I was torn. But a group of us got together and we helped clean up the next day. And so there is more that unites us than divides us. And it's going to require more introspection from all of us to truly meet this moment we're in right now. Because I'm a bit concerned, given everything we're seeing in Washington right now in this election. No one's coming to save us, and we have to think differently about the importance of local solutions to local needs. And now more than ever, it's going to be up to all of us to think differently about what's our role in the movement. And we can't negate the importance of that introspection in order to achieve that solution long term.
I think every willing, able-bodied person has a role in the movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I love history, and it's amazing to see women who made fish fry dinners on Friday, and during the bus boycott, they would sell those dinners, and that was money that was used for gas. It was used for the maintenance for cars and drivers, and all those little things. There is so much, and even now today, there is real work to be done. And I agree. It is seeing white allies step in and find their voice, I think, has been among the shifts that have happened during this season.
Mm-hmm.
What was January 1st or December 31st, as we rang in, or as you rang in 2020? Where were you? What were you thinking? What were you planning for the year? What do you think about 2020? Here we are, October.
I think everyone had the 2020 vision hashtag on Facebook or Instagram that this was the year. I know I was thinking, about my future and whether I was going to stay in the private sector or do something different. And I think what I've learned the most in 2020 is you got to just take it one day at a time. And, as my mom says, you got to just try to win the day. And I don't win every day, trust me. There's a lot of L's in the win-loss column. But, I think it's been so hard in this pandemic managing the daily emotions of what's going on in our country right now. I'm still frustrated and upset by the Breonna Taylor case. Every day we see examples of the criminal justice system not working for people who look like me. And I'm just not convinced that we can rely on the old way of doing things in order to get the solutions we need. So it goes back to what Dr. King said in that book, Why We Can't Wait. And he wrote that book because he was just so frustrated with the pace of change. And, I'm just continue to be frustrated by the pace of change in Cleveland and across this country, and we got to find a way to do better.
Yeah, I'm with you. Amen.
Yeah.
I have to say that over the last couple of weeks, I have a deep appreciation for 2020. And
Mm,
I do believe that we are seeing that our 2020 vision has really been given to us in this year,
mhm.
that we are seeing in a way that we have never seen before.
I agree.
And some of us, you included, have had 2020 vision for a while.
Yeah.
I think more people have been added uh, with their sight around so many issues. And, you know, the big test is going to be what 2030 looks like and,
Mm,
and feels like. You know, as we've referenced heavily, Dr. King, he wrote Why We Can't Wait in 1963. It's disheartening.
yeah.
And, you know, how do we accelerate this? Um, and I want to respond because you've been in a corporate space,
Yeah.
um, and the corporate space has really relied. It is a diversity and inclusion space,
Hmm.
and I um, I have a value on diversity and inclusion and equity, and you know, to oversimplify things, I'm going to say that for me, diversity and inclusion is a way of counting variation. And when you get into doing the anti-racism work, you are creating a much more fertile ground for your diversity and inclusion work to be able to grow. But without the anti-racism work in corporations, there is no real movement, no real traction.
Yeah.
The ground is not fertile.
Hmm. You know, as I think about my experience in corporate America, I would say it's always been a challenge for me as a Black man. You know, my dad was a cop and a firefighter for over 30 years. My mom is a social worker. And so I come from a blue collar family. And, you know, my mom always told me you should be the first one there and the last one to leave, but also to dress for success and be prepared. And I'll tell you, I can count on many hands how many times I was told in a corporate setting, you're too dressed up, you're too prepared, relax your standards. But if I would have showed up the other way, they would have said, you need to dress better, you're not prepared enough. And until we fix this notion of how do you ensure that you're creating an environment where people can be their authentic selves in the workplace, then the D&I thing is just a fancy conversation, right? It makes for a nice bullet point and annual report. And those are the things that we have to figure out how do we measure better in a corporate context to truly make sure that people of color can show up and be themselves to do their best work on a daily basis.
Wow. Wow. Well, your mom and dad, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, police officer and a fireman, he has a few stories.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And your mom is social worker. I see you.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember my parents being close friends with one of the first Black firefighters in Fresno. And
Mm,
he would talk about literally needing to take his own dishes into the fire station
yeah.
because the firemen would, you know, they wouldn't eat after him. They wouldn't, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just the brotherhood has grown. My
Mm-hmm.
son is a fireman. Um,
Yeah.
and they've come a long way, but there's still a way to go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, my dad passed away 4 years ago, but you know, he was one of the first Black cops and firefighters in Cleveland Heights. And as a kid growing up, I heard so many stories about what he went through. But it was his resilience and persistence, and it's just his love of servant leadership that made him get up every day and work both jobs at the same time. And so I see where I get a lot of my work ethic from. But
Yes.
it's that kind of servant leadership we need now more than ever in every part of our civic life to make cities like Cleveland live up to their true potential.
Yes, yes, yes. And your mom, her words are resonating with me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Today is my mom's 90th birthday.
Wow.
So I can't even believe that I'm not, with her, but being 90, between the fires in her county, the rise, we're just very anxious and about COVID. And she is very connected to us, but we are physically missing not being with her. But, your mom's words and this preparedness and, being ready, it just really resonates me. My mom did send me a book of sort of my dad's work life that had a lot of his HR files and photos. Yeah. And my dad was a civil engineer. Mm. And one of the photos is my dad's office. So it's all men. It's all white men. They've got their little pocket protectors. They're, civil engineers in an electronical engineering culture. Yeah. And my dad. And, my mom and I think the picture was taken 1979. And in the picture, everyone is business casual, polo shirts, collared shirt. And my dad is the only one in a suit. Mm. And, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's almost as if, and many folks in white America aren't used to being around people of color who know how to, who present themselves in a way that they're ready for work, right? And you got to dress for success, as my mama told me. And so, and dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And those are things that, are all important about being your authentic self in the workplace every day.
So you leave Cleveland and you head to American University.
Yeah.
And so my daughter got accepted to American, and how you go on the trips.
Yeah.
We go, we're so excited, American University, and we're on the college tour. And my daughter has given me all the instructions on how I should behave, and I'm doing really well. I'm doing well. And then a woman behind us says, is this a safe neighborhood?
I'm laughing because, I know where the neighborhood is. It's
exactly. And I, my daughter can just feel through osmosis that I am coming apart.
That's great.
And she gives me the clutch. Please.
Like, no, Mom, not here. Not here. That's awesome.
Yes. Well, that's my American story. So you're at American University, great university, Washington, D.C., Northwest. And what are you thinking you will do with your life?
That's a great question. I went to American because I was heavily influenced by 9/11. I was a freshman in high school when 9/11 happened. I thought the best way for me to serve my country was to work at the State Department, be a diplomat, go abroad. So my initial major was international relations and political science, and I wanted to study Arabic. That was the plan freshman year.
So you should be at American University.
Yeah, exactly.
This is it.
Exactly. And I got an early decision. And so I was just cruising senior year. I was ready to go to DC. It was all awesome. And then I got the fellowship to do community organizing work in Southeast DC and Anacostia. And at the time, Anacostia had some of the highest rates of HIV and AIDS that rivaled third world countries. I had one of the highest high school dropout rates in America. And I'm organizing in this neighborhood, and I see a lot of kids who look like me. with the same similar life story as me as a kid from Mount Pleasant coming up 121st and Dove. And I thought that, DC being truly the capital of the world, I'm in Anacostia, a stone's throw away from the Capitol building. I can see it from the school we were working at. And I said, something just doesn't sit right with me. This doesn't really make sense. And at the same time, I was blessed to work for President Obama when he was in the U.S. Senate. And we were having lunch.
Who'd you work for?
President Obama, when he was in the U.S. Senate, we were having lunch in the office, and I was asked him, I was like, I'm struggling with what to do. I'm doing IR, but I feel so disconnected from these communities I'm organizing in, and what's the best title? What's the best role I need to pursue so I can have a plan, right? I was an overachiever. I was taking myself too seriously as a freshman. I wanted everything figured out. And he says, Justin, you should aim to do something, not just be anything. And it just blew me away. And from there, I got rid of my major in international relations. I created a major in urban studies. Because I wanted to study, how do I make communities that I grew up in, like Mount Pleasant and Anacostia, more thriving places to live, work, and play, right? Because my dream was always to come back home and to make Cleveland the city that I always visioned and dreamed of in my head. And from there, the rest is history. And so that was a turning point for me, because I realized that I wanted my career to be about doing something, not just being anything. And that's my ethos. That's been my ethos every day.
When you dream, and I see it, I see you. Yeah. It's clear. It's coming through. When you dream about Cleveland and the future of Cleveland and what you see for this city, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How will we know when we are beginning to live up to our potential and when we are living our potential?
I think it's very simple for me. Right now, almost 50% of our kids are living in poverty. We are the worst city in America for children. And so until we become the best city in America for children, then we won't achieve our true potential. And a city that works for our children is a city that can work for everyone. That's the Cleveland I'm fighting for. I want my children and their children and their children to want to live and build their version of the American dream right in Mount Pleasant, right in Huff, right in Clark Fulton. That's what I'm fighting for every single day.
And let's not get that twisted. This isn't about nonprofits doing more programmatic work in the heart of Cleveland.
No.
This is about investment that is long-term and willing to survive the bumpiness of long-term investment, which is a sea change when a lot of investment is always undercapitalized, has short time limits on it. So it is investment. It is real policy change. It is partnership with the people.
And it's also accountability. And we can't forget that. And folks that I've been talking to across the city, they have just lost so much hope that there is no sense of wanting to hold folks accountable, because when you live in a city where you can't even have public comment at a city council meeting, where when you get the votes on a petition to fight for a minimum wage and you're denied that access, when you live in an anti-democratic community, there is no hope. And so we got to change that accountability factor so we can have more hope and give people a sense of ownership and agency, because they just need the tools and the investment to achieve their potential. That's what's missing now more than ever.
That accountability, there are real concrete steps that we could be taking as a city. There is real change that could be happening. I'm always surprised that the worst city for children doesn't seem to create any sense of urgency, any sort of, nothing happens here. I don't get that. I don't understand how people are not moved to action, ashamed of the apartheid system we have in Cleveland. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think it boils down just a lack of hopelessness from everyday people who continue to fight, but get knocked down. They continue to fight, they get knocked down. But also, it also boils down to a sense of complacency from, folks that have made it and say, well, I got to protect my own world. And I'm not willing to get out of my comfort zone because I got to make it to the next election, or I had to make it to the next renewal of my contract as a CEO. And it's that type of complacency that has plagued our ability to achieve our potential for far too long. I mean, I'll say this, we've had the pandemic of COVID, we've had the pandemic of racial inequity, and I think Cleveland has suffered from a pandemic of complacency.
Ooh.
And until we fix that third pandemic, we'll never be the city I believe we can become in the future.
Okay, that's it. The pandemic of complacency. That's it. That's it. That's it. That hurts. That is painful. That is the truth. That is so the truth.
And that's why Cleveland can't wait. I'm impatient because, we have roughly 29,000 folks, $29,000 median household income in our city. I'm complacent because we are now the biggest poor city in America. I'm impatient because of the fact that, people aren't engaged in the political process. And we have to be impatient. And people may say, you're crazy, you're overly ambitious, these things can't get done, but I'm willing to try. And we got to start trying instead of just not doing anything at all.
Well, I think you've got an army to join you. This is the pandemic of complacency here in Cleveland. Yes, 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 yes. How do we turn that around? How do we get busy? How do we start doing that work? This is good. This is good. So much is in our grasp around change, from our schools to our political city halls and structures, influencers as friends, captains of industry in the city that can really make change. We are driving up to the cliff.
Yeah, and we have a finite amount of time to get this right. If we don't make the right decisions over the next 12 to 36 months, we're going to miss a moment. And we'll say that this was the time that our generation came together for our children and their children to make Cleveland a model of urban transformation that can only shock the nation, but can shock the world. That's our task. That's the challenge before us. And I don't have all the answers. Don't get me wrong. I'm just a worker bee trying to do what I can in my small little window over here. But all of us need to think differently about what we're doing, in our boardrooms, in our synagogues, in our churches, at our foundation and nonprofits, to ensure that we're holding ourselves to higher standards and upping up our game to make this city realize its true potential.
And this is not a passion appeal. This is a business.
Everything.
This is the future health of the city. The being able to patch the hole in the boat is going to lift everyone up. This is the crazy thing that I don't understand.
Yeah. And imagine if you did a study and you looked at the budget of the city the budget of every major foundation, the budget of every major nonprofit, and we said, how are we deploying our resources? What tools are we using to address these structural issues that prevent people from living up to their true potential? It's that kind of intentionality that we need. You know, I tell a lot of people this across town. We have a lot of great musicians playing their own music and their own sheet music, but we have no conductor. We need more unifiers in chief to bring our community together in every sector, so we're all swimming up the same lane for our city and region. That's what we need now more than ever right now.
Well, we have, believe it or not, come to the end of our hour. I could talk to you for another hour. This has been absolutely amazing. I have enjoyed the conversation and I am ready to go. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work you are doing with Urbanova across the country. I am excited about what is possible, about being pregnant with possibility. And so I want to infuse our city with that hope. But you are a voice that can not only bring hope, but real solutions. And so I want us all to be able to make sure that you all are reaching out and hearing more from Justin Bibb. This is an important voice in our city doing amazing work. I know we started out a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Margaret Pettigrew-Larkin. It was an amazing conversation. We had Cynthia Connolly, another amazing conversation. We had Don Harris with NASCAR, and now we have had Justin Bibb. And I want to thank Verizon for supporting and sponsoring these conversations. They are playing an important role in the city around the digital divide. And we will see you next week when we have the author of White Fragility, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, for another important conversation. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Take care.